Okay. All right. I'm sitting under a tree in Germany, and I took a nice long walk today, listened to the birds, took in the breath of the forest so I could chill the fuck out. And yeah, just to be explicitly clear, this is, I don't know what's going to come, but it feels like it wants to be a response to and an inspiration, a musing from recently listening to Aubrey Marcus's podcast on his new template for sacred union that he calls radical monogamy. And something that he says in the podcast at the very beginning is that he's not prescribing his path to anybody. He's just speaking of a new path, a new way. And although, yes, I hear that, I feel that with his influence, the millions of people that pay attention to what he shares and have been following his teachings for years will most definitely be influenced, and those that aren't deeply in their center, yeah, it's possible to say that they'll be deeply influenced to maybe imagine and fantasize that his path could be their path. So we can say at the beginning of anything that we're not prescribing something, we're not prescribing a path. And so I'll say at the beginning, I'm not here to judge, and I'm not an authority on what is right and wrong. And I probably will in moments sound judgmental, and I probably will in moments sound like I am trying to be an authority on union. And so it's just to take myself off of the pedestal, although nobody's put me there, to say, this is me trying to work out my own feelings and my own thoughts on this, my own gut reaction, my own intuition. And so I'm most likely going to say it in a perfectly and flawed human way, and I can't rid it from having parts speak that are biased from my own history, my own wounding from the male, the masculine archetype, my own wounding of the mother. Those parts live in me and they voice out. And so sure, they have a place here, they have a voice. And I'm doing my best to speak from a place of open-mindedness and hearing the courageousness that it takes to expose yourself the way the three of these people did. And also my worries, I want to speak to my worries. And the reason I want to speak to my worries is because I've had such a somatic response to this in the last 2 days. I have read so many comments, which is not likely for me. I don't generally spend my time, watching other people's lives unfold and reading the comments that come out from under it. And yeah, I found myself enthralled to this conversation, and I'm going to trust that there's a reason for that. So for me, I'm going to use an Aubrey, moment here in the podcast. He speaks to God and spirit speaking to him. And we all have that possibility of relating to a higher consciousness. And I have a feeling that spirit is saying, be careful, be discerning. This is an important conversation and it's an important matter. So there we go. Yeah, and if you are tired of listening to postmodern new age perspectives on spirituality and evolution, keep going, don't pay attention to what it is I have to say. I don't feel that what I have to say is any more important than anyone else. But I'm hoping that in sharing this, I'll be able to integrate my own confusion and doubt in this conversation, at least with a bit of resolution. Not that I'm going to solve anything in myself or in the situation. So if you haven't listened to the podcast, and it's kind of funny to have all the reservations or the questions I have about it, the inklings in me to say, go watch it, go listen to it. I feel it's a great conversation. I feel it's an important moment in time. I feel if you're deeply in your center and you know your truth, whatever you expose yourself to, you can't be threatened by. If you know what you believe in, and it's beautiful to be open to that belief changing, but if you know in your heart your path in this moment and what guides you in your relationship to the source, then expose yourself to things that allow you to see just how true and strong you are in your conviction. And so my first feeling, I was listening to this podcast with my partner. And as soon as I heard in the first few minutes a tinge of what I thought it was going to be about, even though I have listened to Aubrey's teachings for over 10 years, I turned it off. And my partner said, "Why'd you do that?" And I said, "We need to be careful about what we expose ourselves to. And I have a feeling something in this is going to be very revealing. And are we ready for that? Are we ready to listen to this conversation?" And so we did listen. And we listened together for about 30 minutes. And then I felt quite triggered and quite emotional. My partner was fine with the conversation and has had his own, relationship with some of the things that Aubrey is presenting in this podcast. And my partner stopped listening to it, but I continued to listen to it. And I finished it. And I went to see the post that Aubrey and Alana and Vailana put up. And something in me was so propelled to participate in this conversation through just listening and witnessing and watching. And there were many things that pulled up flags in me. I don't want to call them red flags, green flags. It's not that I agree or disagree. I think that what the three of them are proposing in having a relationship with two wives, at the moment, a wife and a potential, and having children, as Aubrey said, God spoke to him and told him in a medicine temple that he's meant to have children with both of these women. My first feeling was, oof, something in me just felt really questionable about who is the God that he's speaking to, and how is he so sure that this is a God that he wants to be guiding him. And there were other pieces that really felt like deeply, deeply uncomfortable in my body. The fact that this young woman is much younger than them. They met her on a dating app because Aubrey heard that Spirit told him to get on the dating app and he was going to meet somebody important that day. And in meeting her immediately within their first one or two dates, took her into an incredibly deep medicine space. And when I heard Vailana speaking of her own energy rising as this young woman was in this medicine space, and they called the young woman innocent and pure, my red flags went off for all of the younger versions of me that also fell prey to my own naiveness and my trust in masculine energy that ended up creating a lot of harm in my life through the practice of psychedelics, through not really being in my power, believing I was in my power, and believing that choosing this man that was deeply in power, that was more evolved than me, that was more powerful than me, had the answers. So yes, I can see where in this moment you could say you're projecting your own past and your history onto the experience. Absolutely, we're all constantly projecting our life experiences onto things. But what I will say, the flags that came up in me were, I wish that somebody then had have said something to me, had have asked me a question. And so my question is it possible? Is it quite possible that this young woman, although she's empowered, that there is an inequality in power here? Whether you say they're empowered and they have the choice, and Aubrey speaks to if either of them wanted to leave, they'd be wealthy for the rest of their lives, they'd be taken care of. To me, that right there is a power inequality. He is the king sitting on the throne, which is a typical male archetype, like to be the king, to have the power. He's sitting on the throne. And these two queens off to the side that both are in their own queendom, in their own body, and in the creative womb space already are queendoms themselves, are, to me, and again, this is a possibility, is it possible that both of them are also inhabiting and embodying qualities of the feminine, which is to be more submissive to a man, which is, even in our power, a deep desire to submit, a deep desire to be devoted. And we have moved past being completely objectified to having power, but still fighting these norms in the patriarchy of equality, in the sense of within polyamory, what I've noticed is you see many constellation where there is a powerful alpha male that has multiple women that are devoted to him, that are power alpha women, which is more accessible generally to find because the alpha women, hey, they've learned to share. They've learned to take the back seat. They've learned to, that in the objectification, they sometimes have insecurities and wounds that they're not good enough. So they work to expand. They try to expand their understanding and their empathy to be devoted to their partner and his desires. And so you find multiple women that are willing to create space for each other, even if it's painful, even if it brings up wounds. But what I don't see so much is another king entering the space and staying. Because if a true king enters the space, he always wants to sit in the throne. A true king, and like in the podcast it was said, Violana had a partner for a year, which I felt like kept being the fallback anytime Aubrey wanted to speak to, well, she has the same freedom that I have. Okay, yes, it looks that way, and it's not the same. Because in the long run, do you think that a king that enters the space is going to want to stay the second king? Are there ever two thrones for the king? I doubt it. I haven't seen that constellation where the second king is like, yes, I'd love to come in and be your second choice. I'll be the one that's discarded. I'll be the one that gets less attention because I'm so devoted to you. It's something that we generally see in the female makeup, but not the male. And this is heteronormative in the way that I'm speaking. So I find it for Aubrey, it's wonderful because he's an incredible alpha male with a shit ton of money, power, and beauty, which also is interesting to me that everything around him, everyone is beautiful and powerful and like on top of things. And I don't see the average person like in any of his programs or in any of the spaces that he's like championing. It's like everyone is a model and even both of his partners are runway models, and that's wonderful. It's beautiful, but it shows to me that there is a deep pillar and desire to be surrounded by power, money, and beauty. And I'm going off track now and being a bit on tangent. But when I look at this constellation and what's being promoted to the general public through the millions of people that are paying attention to this conversation is, yes, it is a new template for sacred union that could work for some. And I'm so glad that they spoke to that. And that's absolutely beautiful. And I imagine there are going to be a lot of uncomfortable conversations within couples where these dynamics are not healthy and there's not safety and trust within them to introduce these. And I can see, and again, this could be my story, but a possibility that women will again try to outstretch themselves from that wound with the masculine that's still not healed fully yet collectively, that I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving. Okay, if I make myself better, if I evolve to be, transcendental with this man that's blowing my mind out with psychedelics and like, super expanding in his consciousness, if I can just meet him, then I'll be worthy. And okay, I'll do that by adding in another sister and another sister. And like, when does that end? And so what tinged my heart is, as a woman who deeply reveres devotion and commitment and who has played in the world of polyamory and openness and still never in my body allowed myself to have multiple lovers because it just did not feel right in my being. And I know it is for others. So it's not to say that this is wrong. But what it is to say is, if you're going to put something like that out to millions of people and you've only been in the relationship for a little over a year, it seems, you don't have the footing yet. Like, you barely have ground for what it is that you're approaching. And if this is a new template for sacred union, wonderful. But when you're talking about bringing children into the world with both of them, and you're looking at the amount of money and power and status that one person has in that triad, and that the others now have because they're connected to him, there is a power imbalance. Like, that's not something we can ignore. And just because you say, hey, you're free to leave, what I didn't hear from Aubrey was, if Violana, who is my wife, does not agree with this, then I will uphold my commitment and my promise to her in marriage. What he's saying is, if she doesn't agree to this and she leaves, I will pay for her for the rest of her life and she will be wealthy. But I will continue on this path with Alana or whomever comes into the picture. That to me did not sound like an integrated masculine standing by his queen, as he calls her. And so, yeah, I see in the comments, like, many people speaking about the fact that Vailana and Alana are empowered, and I don't know them personally. I don't know Aubrey personally. Again, this is just what I feel in my being. I see them pushing their edges a lot. Vailana has said for years on the podcast that she'd be absolutely devastated if Aubrey were to return to polyamory, and she said that she's wanted to be in a monogamous relationship. And she said on this podcast that she's never known monogamy. And that was such a devastating comment, because I see, if your queen is sitting there saying she's never known this thing that she's wanted, and you say that you want her and you are devoted to her in life, why would you continue to push past her edges? Why would you continue to push her to expand in a way that feels so incredibly uncomfortable for her? And yes, she will evolve, and it's initiation, and I'm sure that this is like incredibly empowering for her. But what is Aubrey sacrificing? What is, and yes, he keeps speaking about the one lover that Vailana had, and this is like, I feel like this is his fallback of like, see, I let her do it so I can do it. But this is different. He's gonna have 2 women that he's speaking to being with for his life, that he's going to raise children with. And so it raises all these flags, especially around the amount of psychedelics that's being used. Because when we introduce the medicines that he constantly speaks about, especially with 5, which I believe is what he's referring to in the God Bomb, this is the most profound and powerful medicine known to man at this point. And as someone who also works in that space, it is very easy to believe that when you're popping off as much as it seems that Aubrey is, you begin to believe that you are a god, and that you are a prophet, and that you are sent here to deliver light codes for the new earth. And so it is so important, I believe, to have these conversations in a public space to make sure that we're staying within integrity, because I do believe, I trust that he believes that he's doing good. I don't think he's a bad person. I appreciate so much of what he shares. But I think this is that moment that you sit down as a council and a tribe and you say, hey, brother, is it possible you're maybe smoking a bit too much toad and taking a bit too much ketamine? And maybe you should sit in silence and go to nature and put your hands in the earth and do something in the earth for a bit and just see. And for the women as well, like, hey, maybe just lay off the psychedelics and leave the space within each other and see what happens when there's spaciousness and distance from all of these practices that you're doing. So this is my thoughts. And yeah, I will reveal, like, as someone who went through a very deep initiation with a very, very powerful man who served me the same medicine that Aubrey is serving, I wasn't told what this medicine was or the profound impacts of it, which I feel Aubrey revealed in the podcast, that Alana had no idea what this medicine was, but was pure and innocent and decided to jump into it. I did the same, and it profoundly shifted my reality in so many beautiful ways. I woke up to a lot of calcifications in the way that I perceived the world through someone else's lens, through a societal lens, and so I'm appreciative for that. But it was done through such deep harm and manipulation that I don't even think that the man that did it really realized what he was doing. And I didn't realize what was happening at that time either. And it led to profoundly beneficial impacts in my life. And so what I will say is, if this is what these women need, and I'm guessing that it is, or it wouldn't be here and it wouldn't be exposed to millions of people, I'm just going to keep asking questions to myself and having conversations and saying, all right, this is in public. So if you put it into public and me putting this into public, you are asking to participate in the universal conversation that is this wild tether and fabric of life that we live through the lens of social media. So I'm entering the stream, and I'm happy to be challenged, and I'm happy to see my blind spots, because I see the world through the lens in which I have lived it. But I feel so much in this is revealing deeply the unintegrated masculine wound of not enoughness and a fear of commitment and a lack of devotion, and calling it radical monogamy because you're so radically in love with one partner, okay? But it's not monogamy. Let's call it what it is, and I don't know what that is, but it's not monogamy. And does it become radical monogamy when both women have children and you're living as a tribe? Do you love Vailana more than you love Alana? Do you love Vailana's children more than you love your children with Alana? These things, our earth, we haven't, there are few places working with these ways of being in polyamorous, and I would love to believe that we had the faculties and the skillfulness to live this way, and maybe we are walking that direction, and so it's beautiful that this conversation is being had. And if Aubrey and Alana and Vailana in 10 years, I'd say in 10 years, still have this beautiful relationship and they're thriving with their children, wonderful. Let's sit down and have a conversation about how to move in that way in a more, in a healthier, more graceful way. But within a year and a half, I don't know if, at least in my opinion, it's not a template I want to be taking advice from. And another point here was, just the week before this podcast came out, Aubrey had a woman on his podcast who was speaking about her thoughts on the divine template between man and woman. And she reveals herself to be Alana's teacher, who is Aubrey's new third partner. And this is very interesting to me because a lot of what she's sharing is that women are meant to give themselves to the masculine, to lean on the masculine. And while this is absolutely beautiful, and I would love to lean back into the arms of a strong, centered masculine, when we're talking about the unintegrated masculine that has not made himself a safe place within his self and center, leaning back into a wavering, unanchored masculine, into a false prophet or a false king, is dangerous. That is the patriarchy. So when this beautiful woman who is the teacher of his new partner reveals that her idea and what she is sharing with the world and influencing young women to do and young men to believe that they deserve, and she's saying that a woman gives herself to the man, that is her that is her path. It again brings up some red flags, especially this coming before he speaks to his new sacred template, which in what I've noticed, he says that there's an equality between them. But from what has been interviewed before, it seems that the woman will be the one that submits. Does the male submit to the woman's request? It seems not. It seems that Vailana's boundaries get pushed and pushed and pushed. She submits to the highest desire and need of the masculine. And I'm imagining that the teachings have influenced this young woman as well. And again, I don't know. Maybe this is exactly what we need. I'm sure it is. I'm sure that many of you are going to be so deeply touched by this and feel so seen and acknowledged in who you are and where you're walking, and more power to you. And I just pray that those young men and men in all generations, really ask yourself, if you start to lean into this path, is it coming from a deep centered anchor inside of you that knows who you are, that knows where you're walking, that has given yourself all that you need so that you're not trying to drain it or take it from the feminine? Really try to love from that place, because we've already done so much harm to one another, all of us. It's not about the male wound, the female wound, it's the masculine and the feminine in dance. And we are taking huge steps right now as women to not only be in our power, to be in our softness as well. And we're getting there. I really feel we're getting there. We're getting to a point where we're resourcing ourselves enough that there is enough opportunity, enough possibility, enough equality for us to finally be standing deeply in our own truths and our own center. And we do, and this is a heteronormative view, and a deep desire to lean back into the masculine in whatever, non-binary way that looks. like leaning back into the support, the anchor, the king archetype in whichever body that reveals itself to be. So I do trust. I trust that this is revealing the shadow of the collective on the feminine side and the masculine, of submission and of dominance and of false prophecy and God complexes. I'm not saying that is what Aubrey is displaying, but I'm questioning. I'm asking the question of like, what is this? And how is it going to turn out? And what does it look like to everyone else? So I'm very curious. I'm in the conversation. I am watching, and I'm praying for us to be so rooted firmly in our truths that whatever you feel when you watch this and you get into this conversation, that you really tune in somewhere deep inside of you that is your intuition and not your fear, and know where you stand. And to not allow yourself to be pulled in different directions or pulled into desire or lust that is lacking in integrity and groundedness. Like, may this fortify us in the pillars of what we believe our paths to be. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm really curious to see what comes from all of this. And I pray for Aubrey and these women. I truly do. Like, I believe that they are leaders in the world right now. They influence so many, and they have so many great things to share. And I hope that the backlash that they're getting from feeding themselves to the fire, that they don't just say that everything is a projection of everyone else's fears and insecurities, and really step back and take spaciousness to look at if this is truly in their highest, if it's in the highest for their unborn children, if it's like deeply each of their individual truths, and not only, God speaking through Aubrey, but through each of them is God telling each of them, like, this is in my highest. Yeah. So I'm curious of everyone else's opinion on New Age relating and how to healthily be in devotion while also being free and breaking free from the imprisonment of commitment in the way that we used to see it, but like radically choosing commitment, radically choosing devotion, and being free within that because you've made your choice, whether that's in a polyamorous structure or a monogamous structure or whatever it might be. I just want to know, how are you loving? How are you loving? And how are you doing it in a loving and healthy way, not only for you and for others? And how are you doing it in a way that doesn't sidestep or completely overstep your partner or your partner's boundaries? Like, are boundaries still being respected within your connection, or is someone deeply fucking uncomfortable and pushing past their edges constantly? Like, I want to know how we're loving each other, because this is the path I want to walk, in deep divine union and devotion. And I haven't found that completely yet, with someone that is just like, I am so fully in, and I am so deeply devoted, and I've made my choice, and regardless of fears and doubts, here I am, and here is where I stand, and this is what I've chosen. And so I have a lot to learn. So feel free to share. I'm very curious. Blessings.